Okay, today's lesson is officially about the quadratic formula, but we're starting with this because this is what it's going to look like when the quadratic formula is done, is you're going to have one of these and you'll have to reduce it. All right, so now we've gotten it so far that this part got simplified down to this, and most people can do that. But this is the part where people, if they're bad at this, this is usually the part they're bad at. This part right here can factor. Everybody can factor 9 into 3 times 3. That's not a problem. It's the top part that's harder to factor. All right, what comes out of both this and this? Say it if you know it. 3. 2 does go into this, but 2 doesn't go into that. So we use 3. So if 3 comes into both of them, then 3 goes outside here. And on the bottom, I still have 3 times 3. And why is that good? Because these 3's will cancel. But I'll wait till a minute from now to do that. And now what's left in here? Here's how you can tell. 3 times whatever I put here needs to bring me this term back. And 3 times whatever I put there needs to bring me that term back. So you'd have negative 3. Because 3 times negative 2. See, I can check it though. That's smart. Checking it right as I do it. 3 times negative 2 makes negative 6. And then 3 times root 3. So 3 root 3. Did I do that right? No. I should check it. 3 times that would make 9 root 3. Okay, so then I better put just a root 3 here. Just trying to show you how you can make sure you're doing it right. And now I'm going to double check it one last time. 3 times negative 2 makes negative 6. And 3 times negative 3, or 3 times root 3 makes my 3 root 3. Cool. Now I can cancel the 3's and be comfortable that that is my answer. Negative 2, plus and minus, root 3 over 3. Now I want you to just think about this for a second. What if this had been like the square root of 49 and it just came out to 7? Can you guys not talk right now? Okay. If this had been a 7, if it had just come out really nice, then I'd actually want you to get both answers. Do you get what I mean? I shouldn't leave it like this if it was actually 7. I go negative 2 plus 7 divided by 3, and then I do negative 2 minus 7 divided by 3. And this one ends up being nice. This one ends up being a fraction. But either way, I get the 2 answers. Why don't we do that on this problem? Because you don't know what the square root of 3 is. So you can leave this since you don't have square root of 3 memorized. It's like 1.6 or something like that. But you don't need to go through and get your decimal answers. Okay. The other one that we did over there is a lot like this. I'm going to do it really fast. Negative 15 plus and minus 5 all over 10. And then this one becomes negative 15 plus 5 over 10. And negative 15 minus 5 over 10. This one would be 1. And this one would be 2. I think? Or was it negative 2? Negative 2. Thank you. They're both negative, in fact. Right? So this one, trying to do too much in my head, that's dangerous. Negative 10 divided by 10, so it's negative 1. Yep, this one's negative 1. And this one would be negative 20 divided by 10, negative 2. All right. So how do you solve this? Just wait a second, please. How do you solve this? This is the quadratic formula. If you have it memorized and you know this is A is 1, B is 9, and C is 10, go ahead and solve this thing. All right, x equals negative b, in this case, negative 9. And the way I like to do is kind of like sing the song as I'm doing it. You could do whatever you want, but plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 9 squared, 81, minus 4ac. And the a, let me tell you, right there, I always put 2 parentheses. Because if you're going to screw this up, I guarantee you it's going to be underneath this root, and it's not going to be the squared part, because everybody knows how to squared. It's going to be this part right here. Out of all the mistakes, and how many of you, don't even have to raise your hand because you know, how many of you have looked back at your tests and gone, stupid mistake, and it probably cost you a grade, right? All right. So my point is, if you're going to make a stupid mistake, it's going to be right in that blue box there. So be careful with that. All over 2a, and 2 times 1 is 2. If this had a number here, like a 5, though, don't forget it'd be 2 times 5 on the bottom. All right. So then I got to simplify it down a little bit more. negative 9 plus and minus the square root of, okay, 4AC. That AC part, Mr. Server said that's the, I'm going to be really careful on that because the most mistakes are made in there. A is 1, C is 10. And you know when it's extra bad is when there's a negative thrown in there. Because people forget then there's one negative here, but what if one of these was also a negative? You get what I mean? If there's two negatives, then it turns into a plus problem. And people forget that. All right. So this became 81 minus 4 times 10 is 40. 81 minus 40 is 41. All over 2. 2a, but a was 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. There we go. Do you know the square root of 41? No. Now, if you knew the square root of 41 could actually simplify, like if it was the square root of 40, then you could make it square root of 4 times square root of 10, you know. Simplify it if you can. Because right here, you could lose a half a grade right there. Your test could go from a 95 down to a 90 if the only mistake you make was a simplifying, unless the problem was only about simplifying. I might be able to give you only 5% off if you screwed up your simplifying. Again, unless the problem's only job was simplify this. Well, then if it's not simplified, it's not right. But if the kid had, for instance, a 51 there, do you get a lot of people think that 51 is prime and they'd be like, oh, I can't do the square root of 51. But actually, there's something goes into 51. You know what? Yeah, 3 goes into 51. Okay, so anyway, you simplify it if you can. Now, 51 is not a great example because it's 3 times 17. And neither one of those actually works out nice. But it's more pertinent if it was something like square root of 80. You should not leave something like that alone because I guarantee you like 4 goes into that, for example. And the square root of 4 would be 2, so you could simplify square root of 80. Or a square root of 50. See what I mean? So like kid gets to this point and thinks they're done. And like, crap, I didn't know square root of 50 could simplify. Yeah, square root of what and square root of what? 25 and 2. So then it would be 5 root 2. Okay. Our job today really just boils down now to weirder and weirder looking setups. Because if you know that formula, quadratic formula, now the only hard part is figuring out A, B, and C. Do you get that this one looks a little different than the last one? So A, B, and C aren't quite so obvious. So all you have to do is set them up so they're equal to 0. So I'm adding 4x to both sides. Why? Because I want it to equal 0. Because that's what they're all going to equal if you're doing it right. To be able to get A, B, and C, you have to have it set equal to 0. You can't have something over on the other side. It can't equal like 8. That's not legal. That doesn't make it a quadratic. Until it's set equal to 0, you can't use the quadratic formula. All right, so A is, well, if there's no number there, there's a 1 there. B, C, hint, this one might not have real roots. That might mean there's a square root of a negative involved. Do you remember when you have a square root of a negative, what letter you're going to probably throw into the answer? All right, go ahead and do it. Figure out the answer for this guy now that we got it set equal to 0. Now this one might actually have normal real roots. But I'm just warning you, at some point today, I guarantee it, we're going to have square roots and negatives come in. All right, I'm going to pause while we give that one a shot. Negative 4 plus and minus square root of b squared, which is 16, minus 4, and this is where all the mistakes are made. Be careful underneath that root. All over 2 times 1. And then a is 1 and c is 2. And so it's negative 4 plus and minus square root of 16 minus 8, which is 8, all over 2. And if you stop right there, you'll lose the points. Because why? Square root of 8 can simplify. Good. And I hope you did root 4 and root 2, which would make 2 root 2. I always do 2 roots. I don't try to do them in my head. You shouldn't either. You should start with 2 roots and then get 2 root 2. Because too often kids are like, is that 3 root 2? No, it's 2 root 3. Or is it 4 root 3? Oh, so anyway, what is root 4 and root 2 simplify to? Everybody, if you write that out, you're going to get it right. 2 root 2. See what I'm saying? Just take a second and write 2 roots when you do it. All right, now I'm going to rewrite that. Negative 4 plus and minus 2 root 2 all over 2. It's a weird looking 2, but it is a 2. Okay, then factor the top. Negative 2. Oh, wait. You can factor out a negative 2, or you can leave it as just a regular 2 comes out. Either way would be fine. I'm going to choose to factor out a regular 2 out front. And then the minus sign would just be reversed. And it's all over 2. Again, you could have factored out a negative 2 here and made this a positive 2. That'll be okay. I personally think it's best to just match up exactly what's on the bottom and the top. That way when I cancel these off, I don't have any leftover negative dangling around out there. Did you have negative 2 plus and minus root 2? Raise your hand if you had that one right. Good. Moral of the story on this problem, the only difference, we had to set it, what? Equal to 0. Got to set them equal to 0. Okay. Could they get weirder? Yes, they could. And one of the ways they get weirder is they make you decide whether you want to have this stuff all brought over to this side or the other way around. It's either way is okay. But let me tell you, it's always best if your lead term, if your x squared term is positive. So I personally on this one would add x squared to both sides. You could have gotten these two to go to the other side, and then as long as they're all on one side, it'll be equal to 0. But I think having that x squared term be positive would be smart. So I'm not going to bring stuff over this way. I'm going to go this way. And I'm okay with, in this case, doing a double step at once. If you can handle it. These two are both gone and it equals 0. And you got to put all that together. And that's your quadratic. Remember, as long as you set equal to 0, then you know A, B, and C. Then you can do the quadratic formula. One more thing. Remember me saying that if you can factor it, you should? Factoring is just the easier way. But if you get good at this, it can tell you what the factors are. Do you see what I'm saying? If you do it this way, you can get factors that you might have been having trouble factoring. Some people use the quadratic formula instead of factoring to find how to factor it. Now, as in, let's say I tell you this, and you are stuck and you can't figure out how to factor it. You could do the quadratic formula anyway, get the answers, and the answers would end up telling you what the factors are. Do you get that the answers on this would be negative 5 and negative 1? Those are the two answers for this equation. And then that would tell me, oh, so you're saying it could be x minus 5, or sorry, plus 5, and x plus 1. See what I'm saying? If you get these answers from the quadratic formula, doesn't that tell you what your factors are? Yeah. So you could use this to factor stuff if you wanted to. You don't have to. So this lesson's about solving, not about factoring. But I'm just trying to give you that added help that this helps you factor things when you can't figure out what the factors are. All right, you should have said x squared minus 9x plus 14 equals 0. And remember me saying if you can factor it, you should. Let's say you take a second and figure out 14 could be factored into, oh yeah, this actually could work. It will. Try factoring it. It works out so much faster than the quadratic formula, but otherwise, we could do the quadratic formula. Either figure out how to factor this puppy or do the quadratic formula. That's why I start with, if you can factor it, you should, because this one factors. And then the answers are going to be boom, boom, instead of taking a while to do the quadratic formula. How many of you got it this way, that it was minus 7 and minus 2? Raise your hand if you had that. Awesome. And if you didn't know that, I want to show you that the quadratic formula would have worked. X equals negative b, which would be positive 9, because that's the b term, plus and minus square root b squared, which is 9 squared is 81, minus 4ac, 4 times 1 times 14, I always put parentheses in there because that's where people mess up. All over 2a. There we go. And then I bet you this is going to work out nice. And it does. Square root of, okay, 81 minus 4 times 14. That's kind of a pain. 81 minus 56. What am I supposed to do with that? Oh, it's 25. I knew it was going to come out nice. And then I can keep going. And then I can keep going. And then this one becomes 14 over 2, and what's that? And this one becomes, well, yes, 4 divided by 2, which is 2. You're right. So there we go, 7 and 2. Do you get then? If I hadn't ever figured out what factors were, I would now know that it must have been x minus 7 and x minus 2. But I knew how to factor right from the beginning. See? All right, I'm going to give you one last thing to do that's like this because I want you to be able to see what if there's no middle term? Then what do you know? What's 0? No, x is not 0. There is 0 x's, I'll give you that. So would you agree what somebody said is x is 0? It's not exactly x is 0, but it's 0x. See what I mean? So the b term is actually, what's b then? 0. Now do the quadratic formula and figure out your answer. Take a second, run through the quadratic formula one more time. See if you've got it. And after this one, I'm going to start the review for the cumulative test. This Friday is when you have your normal test. Then we have 2 days of review and the cumulative test on Wednesday of the following week. Right before Thanksgiving, you have your cumulative test, which covers this test again and the 2 tests before that, which were like complex numbers and the first part of quadratics. So we're going to start reviewing a little bit each day for that cumulative test. That way, when that day comes, you won't have just way too much to try to remember. We'll just tackle a little bit each day. I'm going to pause while you give this one a shot. There. Okay, so now we take this and we put stuff into it. Dice of destiny. Who's going to put stuff into it? It's row 3, person 6. That's you. You can do this. What's negative b? False. What's b? So what's negative 0? It's just 0. It's just nothing there. You could put a 0 there if you wanted to, but you don't have to put anything there because it's nothingness. Okay, now what's b squared? That's this part. 0 squared, so it's just 0. So it's like not even there. You could put a 0 there. And then negative 4ac. What's the a part? And what's the c part? Good. Do you notice there were 2 negatives, and therefore it's positive 4 times 3 is positive 12 underneath the root. A lot of people are going to have a negative because they're going to go, see, that's a negative right there. There's another negative that makes it positive. So plus and minus root 12 all over 2 times a, which is not 2 times 1 this time. 2 times a, 2 times 3, that makes 6. If you left it this way, I would cry a little bit and mark it wrong because it's not simplified. And b, tell me what to do. Okay, so I'm going to go root 4, root 3, and then I'll agree with you, 2 root 3 over 6. And can I leave it that way? No, because something factored on the top, so something should factor on the bottom. This 6 could be 2 times 3. Cancel them. Plus and minus root 3 over 3. How many of you actually got that far all by yourself? Okay. There's a lot of little reducing steps in there. Any questions? All right, yes. If you left a 0 in the front, I would not mark it wrong. But do you get you really don't need it? You really don't need it because plus and minus root 3 is just as good as 0 plus and minus root 3. Okay. All right. That's the big formula for the day. If you can't figure out A, B, and C, just set it up, and once it's set up equal to 0, see, I even could throw it in where there's a letter in one of the spots. Did you get A here would be 1, B here would be 6, and C here would be C. Do you get I could put a K here and an M here? Do you get that it's still the same formula, x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, but the b is actually m, the a is actually k, and the c is actually negative c. Do you get what I'm saying? You could have a problem like that, and it's just taking all the same concept and throwing a variable into it, which is, we do that a lot in pre-calc, where we don't use numbers anymore for our variables, or our constants. Our constants become variables, which really messes with people's heads. So this would be x equals negative m plus or minus the square root of m squared minus 4 times a times c. What's a? Okay. What's c? Negative c. All over 2a, which is 2k. And there would be your answer. You wouldn't be expected to know more than that. Just that you'd stick the variables in instead of the letters, or instead of the numbers. All right, your homework for tonight. Oh, wait, and I said I wanted to review. Here's just one thing from complex numbers. Do you remember how to solve hint? You'll have a square root of 20 in your answer, which you'll need to simplify. This is from the complex numbers test. Are you square rooting both sides? Because you should be. And who remembers that really important thing after that? Yes. Absolute value of x minus 5. If you forgot that, you forgot a lot. Square root of 20, I'm going to make it root 4 and root 5 at first. And then I'll make it 2 root 5. Then I need to break it into two things. X minus 5, x minus 5. The only difference between those two equations is that negative sign right there. Do you get that? You can just write the same thing twice if you want to, and then just stick in one negative right there. The reason is because what's underneath here could either be 2 root 5 or negative 2 root 5, because you're absolute valuing it, and it'll work either way. Final answer. I don't care which you put first, 5 plus 2 root 5 or 2 root 5 plus 5. I'm going to do it this way. That's negative 2 root 5 plus 5. Negative 2 root 5 plus 5 and positive 2 root 5 plus 5. How many would have got that one right? All right, awesome. Then I'm going to try to do 2 little things each day. That'll just make it easy to take that cumulative test when it comes around. You remember that I squared is negative 1, I hope. So what's I to the 7th? Hint, it's a whole bunch of I squareds, which means a whole bunch of negative 1s. And sometimes there's a leftover I, and sometimes there isn't. So write down, this is I squared times I squared, etc. Figure out what I to the 7th would be. I'm going to pause while I give that a shot. Okay, you should have said I squared, and another I squared would make I to the 6th, and then there's one more I. Do you get that? If I put that I to the 1 there, it'll make a total of I to the 7th. And then that's I to the 7th is -1, -1, -1, and an I. If you want to make that I square root of -1, you're just going to complicate your life. Because your answers either should be I's or just numbers. This comes out to -1I. So the answer is -1I, or just -I would have been fine. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Awesome. Okay, so there's a little review from complex numbers. There's more, but we'll just do a little bit each day. All right, homework for today is the thing called, where is it? Yeah, I think it's a I know it's a worksheet. There it is. Now, one more thing I want to let you know officially. I'm putting this on the recording, to anybody missing today. They won't miss this announcement. I am going to be taking your homework on the day of the test, and the homework on the day of the test will be your last day to turn in late work. I will accept late work right up until your test, but during the test, like when you're taking your test, if you want to turn in any late work, that's your last chance to turn it in, is during the test that day. If I get overloaded with too many people coming up during the test, then if there's anybody left, I'll let you do it still after school that day, or I might write you a one-day pass extension if there was too many people. But otherwise, I'm taking them during the test, and that's your last chance to turn in late homework. So for instance, this assignment, I am going to be collecting it via, like I did last time. You guys send it to me on the Dropbox. I'm going to grade it myself. I'm going to give you a score right away. And there's a few of you that may want to catch up on your homework, because I'm going to start making a few phone calls here, because there's a few kids that are just chronically not doing their homework. And that's not okay for an honors class. I understand you're going to have a now and then missing assignment. I get that, because there's some nights you're just too busy, or you got a huge hockey tournament or whatever. But that shouldn't be happening all the time. So fix that, or you're going to get a phone call. All right, that's all I got for you for today. Homework is due, all late work due on the day of the chapter test.